Okay, friends, I'm going to animate this little banner made by 10-year-old Umika, and I'm going to make a few changes to it before I animate it, okay? All right, one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the text layer, and I'm going to click on it and drag it down and duplicate it. So I have two text layers, the same. You may also notice there is the yield shield here because I don't have her font. So I'm going to hide one of the layers and select the other and go to the text tool and select the text here that says little people can do big things. And as soon as I do this, look what happens. It says the font is missing. It's Cooper Black. What do you want me to do? All right, so I'm going to click cancel. I'm going to select it again because I'm flailing there. Let's try that again. Escape key. One more time. Click. Okay, cancel one more time. Click, drag all the way down. I am assuming that's truly selecting the text. But because I don't have that font, I'm just going to click OK. It has now changed all of the font content into this other font. Not necessarily what I really want it to do. Could be a bad thing. So I want you to recognize that as when you get someone else's work, you may want them to turn the text into outlines or make sure you have the font. So knowing I didn't have the font, I thought I would just point that out to you. I do believe I have Cooper, though. I'm shocked to think I don't have Cooper. So there it is, Cooper. Right, there's Cooper. It wasn't finding it because whatever encoding she used when she made hers, maybe she made it on Windows, and my machine was not recognizing it, but in fact, I actually do have the font. All right, now that is done, and I'm going to click away and toss the top layer and then duplicate this layer again. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to separate the text onto two different lines. I'm going to say on the top one, which is now the bottom one is hiding, I'm only going to have the words future builders. And then on the bottom one, I'm going to have both future builders and the words little people can do big things. Or let's try that again. Or actually, no, I'll take out the word future builders here, and I'll change this text because it's difficult to read to something that's easier to read. So up here is where my text color is, and I'm going to choose something I think will stand out, which is going to be this magenta color. You know, it's still pretty hard to see. Now, as I had planned in my mind to talk about today, one of the other things I wanted to show you in Photoshop, which has not really gone into a lot of detail about, is the idea behind drop shadows and other effects that you can apply to text and other objects on floating backgrounds, meaning transparent backgrounds in Photoshop. So if I double click to the right of this layer, it's going to open up the layer style panel. And on the layer style panel, I can click the word drop shadow. If I just click the checkbox, it will apply the last used drop shadow. However, if I click the name, it actually opens up the controls for the drop shadow's structure. That is different because I want to see the structure. That's key to me. So I'm going to decrease the distance of my shadow, and I'm going to decrease the spread of my shadow down to, let's say, 0, and the size. Here I'm increasing the size again. I'm going to move the angle. I can barely see it. Okay, and also it looks like I have a 50% multiply here. I'll bring that up. That's helping it pop off a little bit. And now I'm going to change the angle a little more. On off. It is not helping much. Now, what is a good thing to know about is you can use a drop shadow similarly to a glow. I want the size here to be a little more choked in. The distance can be slightly off, like so. And as I was just about to say, a drop shadow can be used similarly to a glow. So if I change this black color to something else, such as blue, it becomes more of a glow than it is a shadow. Do you see what I'm driving at there? I'm changing the color here just to give you an idea of what that might do. And I'll pick something that will look really bad like this green, but that's something like a kid would pick, you know, since this is a child's project. So they would probably pick, you know, something really frightening. And I'd be like, that is really cool. I love that, but it's a little hard to read. Don't you think? It's so pretty, but maybe we should make it better, easier to read. What do you think? Okay, Ms. Rudner. All right, so there's that. Okay, so far so good? All right, so now I have this on as a glow, but it was a drop shadow. And then there's all these other crazy things you can do. When applied with some restraint, these can actually be very helpful. This one is bevel and emboss, and notice I'm going to click the name, not the checkbox, because I want it to open up the layer style dialog, as opposed to just clicking the checkbox, which would apply the last used settings. This is a pretty good looking technique here, except I feel like it's just a little over the top, like the shadow is just pushing past the amount of pushiness that it needs to be, so I'm going to lower the depth of that. So it just has a slight hint of the bevel of emboss on it. And now this, as I've been wanting to tell you, can be called a new style. And so the new style aspect of this is the combination of the glow, aka drop shadow, and this bevel and emboss. So if I click this new style button, I'm going to call this one Ugly is Beautiful, and click OK. And now I'm applying the style, click OK, and if I go into the window and I go to the Styles panel, you will see that I have this style. I know it's tiny. Let's see if I can increase the size of these panels to a large thumbnail. And now you can see there it is. This is the style I just created. And that will stay in Photoshop forevermore, not just in this file. It's in the preferences of this Photoshop. Okay? All right, so that's the style I have on that text. Great. Now back to the animated portion of this. I feel as if I could just do a little bit more justice to this text, going back to the text tool and selecting my text. Because I want to increase the size, I'm going to click up here in the size field at the top and use the up arrow to increase the size, and the move tool to move the element around. So trying to get it in a place where it's not as difficult to read. Cool, that's how it's going to be. And again, this is, 10-year-old child's design, so I'm just elaborating on what they did. All right, so now I have Future Builders, and if I select Future Builders and move the Future Builders text, all right, maybe I want to move this over here and select the Little People text. Maybe I want that more centered. If I select them both, holding the Shift key, I've selected both layers. Now I can center them more together. And clicking off the top layer, clicking on, use the arrow key. So those are all the different methods I can use to try to center that a little bit more. I feel like one thing I could do to just make this way more legible, which is a concern, is adding a layer above layer 0. I'm going to add a new layer. Here it is, layer 1. I'm going to fill it, so Command A for select all. All right, so I just did this, Command A, select all, and I'm going to fill it, Option Delete with white. And now I can see some other issues here. That could be issues. So I'm going to move this dots underneath and select the white layer again and decrease the opacity of that layer just to, I'm sorry, Umika, I don't want to break your cute little heart, but you're not here, so maybe you'll see this video. All right, so there is that, and that's a little easier to read. The only thing I'm going to change here is on layer 1, I do want this part to be more prominent where the owl face is. So I'm going to take my eraser tool. This is just down and dirty, not doing any masks or anything here. I'm just going to take the eraser tool, and I'm going to erase on the white layer. That was just lucky there. I now erased just that one little part. If I go back to my settings for my eraser and go to hardness 0, I could just take a look at what would happen if I just increase the color at the top of the bottom. So what I'm doing is I'm just erasing some of the white from that layer so that the text can stand out a little better. Now I can play around with that opacity. I had it down at 57. I could increase it up to something else. So that becomes like a white panel that's semi-opaque underneath the text, making it easier to read. That is all I'm going to do there. And deselect and save this as, file, save as, Gesundheit, save as, and I'm going to call this one banner 2. Great. Now I'm ready to start talking about how to animate this. So I'm going to start a new recording.